Afternoon guys, welcome to solo ReacTalk. This afternoon I'm going to be reacting to Star Wars vs Warhammer 40K episode 36 Libra Nos, made on the AFanWithTooMuchTime YouTube channel. If you guys want to check out my previous reactions to the other episodes, remember the playlist card is going to be at the top here. Just click on it and be able to access them. If you want to check out the original video as well as AFanWithTooMuchTime's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. Yes, episode 35, Heralds of the End. Tarweiler and Shadrach are the Heralds of the End. They are commencing their plans for Exterminatus on Axum, and hopefully the Star Wars side and the Imperium of Man side are able to put a wrench into their plans, preventing the planet from, being exterminated completely. Mace Windu and Obi-Wan Kenobi with the rest of the Jedi who were raiding one of the Imperium of Man vessels have finally landed on Axum, and they're assisting Ayla Secura and her clone troops on the battlefield against the Imperium of Man. It's not going too well for the Star Wars side, but hopefully with the reinforcements, maybe something can happen. Somehow it can turn back into their favor. Somehow, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. Ayla Secura went out searching for Quillen and Voss as well as Coda. However, Coda and Voss have been devoured by Jakal. Yes, Jakal has eaten his snack, his Jedi snacks. And yeah, Tarweiler gets to live to tell the tale once again. And yeah, it's unfortunate what happened to Coda and to Voss, but they were arrogant, thinking that they could demand the surrender of this Inquisitor, and it was their undoing. And then we had Javona and Combia and his mother helping out other pilots, directing the Separatist vessel that had the clone troops from the 501st, if I'm not mistaken, as well as Ahsoka Tano. Yes, Ahsoka Tano was on board that vessel as well. They're trying to direct the vessel to land somewhere on the planet. I'm not entirely sure where exactly, but yeah, Javona is using her Psyker abilities. She's extremely powerful, and yeah, they're directing the ship to land somewhere. Not sure exactly where. I guess we'll know about that probably in this episode or the next episode. Yeah, we'll see. And yeah, that's about it. That's all that happened in episode 35. Let us continue with 36, Libra Nos. 3, 2, 1, go. You're taking me back to home world. I found too much time. You're taking me back to home world.
Spiritu Dominus, Domine Libra Nos.
She spoke softly, with a grace and gentle power, which was carried into audibility by the strength of her suit-mounted helmet speakers. The machine spirit of her warsuit chanting the words with her, demanding not only power of will from its wielder, but unshakable faith. The long arms of Ishtara's Paragon warsuit moved with a fluidity and control denied to nearly all warriors of the Imperium, short of the Emperor's Angels of Death. And it was more than just that. She leapt, the compensators within her armor cradling her brittle bones as the Canoness Superior cleared the distance from her own lines, landing atop one of the beast-like tanks of the enemy.
Well, at least, you know, her armor, her battlesuit armor is not like the penitent engine, where, you know, the driver, if I can say it is the driver of the suit, is exposed to the elements, and, you know, you can shoot at the pilot and kill the pilot. At least with the Canoness Superior, her armor, it's encasing her, I'm assuming, yes, right? And it's protecting her from any forms of explosions or gunfire, or hopefully even the lightsaber attacks. So yeah, at least that's good.
And grasping her glowing blade in both artificial hands, she sank the burning sword into the glass-like cockpit which protected the false men within.
What did he call the sword again? I forgot what AFanWithTooMuchTime called the sword. I cannot pronounce the word. It was a Sabakahiv, something like that. Yeah, I'm sorry, AFanWithTooMuchTime. I forgot the name of the blade that she's, that's in her possession. Yeah. Ugh.
Cleaving through it almost without resistance as the sun-glow radiance of her weapon's power field flared, casting her imposing, towering form in brilliant light. The gunner who manned the enormous turret on the back of the crawling machine swung his mechanized cannon, bellowing out his alien war cry as
"For the Republic!"
he did. Though he had intended to bat her off his tank, Ishtara reached up with one of her suit's limbs and caught the incoming barrel, servos hissing as it absorbed the force of the strike. The turret mechanism squealed with the strain as the Elder Warrior pushed it further away from herself.
Oh, this is her, okay. Oh, Kubik, well done, well done. Hey.
Drawing her weapon out of the bloody control center of the six-legged tank, and hacking off the barrel of the gun which sought to insult her with its attempts at an attack.
I'm sorry, but what is that on her face? Is that a mask, or is that her? Is that the Canoness Superior? Okay.
The length of the cannon came free where she sliced it, standing to her full height atop the Republic war machine and stomping forward. The clone at the turret controls hastily unstrapping himself and leaping clear of his seat just in time. She sliced his chair and controls diagonally with her powered blade, causing the console to spark and explode beside her. Though that weak concussive force could do nothing to Ishtara within her armor. The replicate trooper scrambled back, kicking desperately to gain distance on the top of the walker, hastily drawing his blaster pistol and beginning to shoot into her. His shots were good, skilled, his blue bolts pinging and sizzling against her golden mask and encased chest. But the mask was not mere gold. It was an aramite composite, the materials of which could have been sold to purchase an entire moon within the Imperium proper.
So the very same material that the custodians wear. Aramite armor. Wow.
And though it was only her mask which contained the holy material within it, the rest of the armor across her body was still far too hard to be breached by a blaster. She raised her blade to end his struggles, prepared to send his human soul, if he even had one, to judgment before the Emperor. The false man cried out in desperation, covering his face with his arms as she cut downward. But, to both of their surprise, her blade was halted, paused mid-swing by the counteracting force of another weapon. A sword of brilliant light. A
Jedi scum.
woman stood over the Republic warrior, one arm trembling as she held up all of Ishtara's physical strength with the lightsaber in her right hand, while her left gripped a second blazing sword, both of them a matching green. The Jedi woman swept out her free arm in a horizontal cut, meant to bisect Ishtara, or at least sever her legs at the knees. In response, the Canoness Superior leapt backwards, landing amidst the soldiers of both sides, flattening 2 replicate beneath her feet. She kicked away an additional clone who was moments from shooting a pinned Carcosan Untouchable to death, backhanding another Republic trooper who raised a grenade into the air, having been mere seconds from tossing it. The actions were quick flicks of her thoughts and reflexes, but the power in them sent both clones careening through the air, dead or broken by the strikes.
Kubik, oh my gosh. The kick just obliterated this clone trooper. Look at all the blood. Oh gosh.
The sound all around her was frightening in its cumulative chaos and volume. Men screamed to their deaths, some slowly, painfully, while others met their ends quickly, lives and wills extinguished from this world. Weapons roared, explosions howling periodically behind the thumping of autoguns, the bleat of blasters, and the screeching of chainswords meeting armor and power fields flaying the air. But through it all, Ishtara heard the Jedi woman scream her battle cry as she leapt from the back of the tank, spinning like a glowing disc of emerald fire. Ishtara seized the woman mid-leap, catching her by the waist with her long arms, the armor which protected them glowing red-hot as the Jedi's heretical swords struck there.
Squeeze.
Repelled by the adamantium alloys which formed the outermost shell of her warsuit. The woman looked stunned for a moment before grimacing as Ishtara closed her fist, attempting to crush the life from the witch warrior. The Jedi was unarmored, wearing the underrobes of her order and little else. The powerful grip of Ishtara's extended arm should have been enough to pulp her instantly. Unimaginably resilient metal fingers sinking and squeezing through flesh until the heretic popped in her hand like an overripened tangerine. But this did not happen. Instead, somehow, the force of the Canoness's grip was repelled, even slowly reversed, as a bubble of warp energy emerged to surround the woman.
This damn witch.
The captive Jedi grit her teeth, face red and veins pronounced as she pushed against Ishtara with the power of her mind. The shell of blasphemous energy which encapsulated her trembling body growing larger and larger. But Ishtara would not have it. The Canoness raised her sword and swung down at the witch in her hand, seeking to slice her head clean from her shoulders, yet only managing to sever both of her arms, as her blade was deflected by the intercession of another combatant. 3, actually. They threw themselves into her at ludicrous speeds, little more than colored blurs thanks to their ignited sabers. One of them, a dark-skinned Xenos with horns and long trailing hair, rammed into her blade, bouncing away as his blue sword crashed against the Tabahaiv, somehow managing to alter the trajectory of her warsuit's powerful strike. The second was a far less human-like beast, a tentacle-headed Xenos who bore a bright green shade of skin. He kicked the wrist of her gripping hand, helping to knock it loose of the Jedi she had sought to crush. His blow empowered by the invisible, corrupting strength of what Ishtara knew must be the warp. The third and last did not strike, instead hooking his arms under the stumps of the Jedi the Canoness Superior had maimed, pulling her swiftly up and away, kicking off from the warsuit's own fist to escape and land upon the ground before her. He was the worst seeming of all, a truly demonic figure, robed like the others, but bearing ruddy, pale skin and a bulbous, inhuman head supporting 2 downward curving horns. The Jedi woman in his arms screamed, her lungs raw, the stumps of her severed limbs cauterized and roasted, cooked down to her bones by the passing contact of Ishtara's burning power sword. From pain to peace, the horned Jedi said in the common tongue of the alien republic, pressing 2 fingers against her head as he did. The burned, de-limbed woman went stiff, rigid as though she were being shocked. And then, the fallen Jedi slackened entirely, eyes rolling up and closing as the being above her bewitched her with his power.
Hopefully she will stay unconscious until they've completed the operation, giving her robotic arms. Yeah, she shouldn't be waking up when her arms are not there and she's still in pain. It's going to be terrible. So hopefully she'll wake up when they're done with the procedure, the operation, and yeah, she has new hands, new arms.
He stood and handed the now unconscious woman off to the many surrounding clones. The other white-armored soldiers beginning to form up at their backs, rifles bristling from behind the 3 Jedi. As the 2 others strode closer to the third, sabers active and burning. Behind Ishtara, much the same thing was occurring. With the silent forms of Carcosan untouchables, the martial ranks of Cadian shock troops, the ragged frenzy of the Freylin faithful, and the religious fervor of her own sisters beginning to pack in around and behind her. Weapons aimed out towards their opposition, moments from firing, but they were halted.
Hold fast, but do not fire, faithful of the Emperor,
she said suddenly, putting her free hand out as she watched the 3 Jedi before her, raising their own fists and halting their troops as they mirrored her sentiment. They were, all 4 of them, paragons of their factions and inspirational figures of either side. And all 4 of them wanted the same thing as the other 3, to do as much as they could with as little strength required. If they could slay her here, standing before her forces, her army, they would crush the spirits of the faithful around her. Or, at least, this is what they desired to occur. Likewise, if she slew all 3 of them while bearing the Emperor's face, the foe would know true fear, or so the Canoness Superior believed. The unspoken understanding was confirmed as the 3 Jedi stepped forward, and the clones behind them stepped back, creating a semicircle of space around them.
I will take the lives of these witches with my own blessed hands. Stand back and behold the strength of our Lord and his throne. Have no fear for me. The Emperor is at my side,
Ishtara Ordain said, and in sacred obeisance, the troops around her did as she bid them, aping the replique and giving her ample space.
This reminds me of high school. when people start fights in high school, people would make a circle around those people who are going to fight, and they'll be screaming, "Fight-o, fight-o, fight-o, fight-o." So yeah, it's taking me back to high school. Crazy times.
The battle still raged around them, but those forces of either side who had been close enough to see were transfixed, protected only by the fighting frenzy of their yet ignorant brothers and sisters. The single, towering form of the Emperor's divine scion stepped forward, stalking towards the 3 Jedi and their glowing weapons. Both of the horned Jedi looked solemn, serious, while the green, tentacle-headed Xenos smiled at her almost cheerfully.
That guy's always smiling. I remember him from Attack of the Clones. He was smiling. In Revenge of the Sith, I don't think he was smiling when he was going to Chancellor Palpatine's office with Mace Windu and the other Jedi. Yeah, I don't think he was smiling then. But in Attack of the Clones, he was smiling. On Geonosis. Yeah, I remember.
Playfully whipping his green saber about. "Have you come to surrender?" asked the smiling knight, speaking a heavily accented Imperial Gothic.
This is not the time to joke.
The mountains cannot bend themselves, and the stars cannot but burn,
she said in response to the mocking suggestion.
So how can the Imperium be made to submit when it stands taller than any mountain and shines brighter than any star?
The Canoness Superior finished saying, hefting her blade and seizing it in both mechanical hands. A duel, then, growled the demonic Jedi. "Would you prefer we fight you one at a time? Wouldn't want to make this unfair for you." The green Jedi mocked again, beginning to stride to her left as the silent, dark-skinned knight began pacing to the right.
I like the God of War music.
That would be unfair to you, Master Heretic, for, despite what you see, I am not alone. My faithful armor and its machine spirit stand by me. And furthermore, the Emperor's hand is upon my shoulder. His breath is at my ear. Though you see one, we are three, and though we are three, yours and mine are still unequal.
Why is the Emperor's breath on your ear? Oh my gosh, no. Tell the Emperor to just step back a bit, okay? He doesn't have to be in your ear and you hear his breath and smell his breath. Ew. No, lady. No. Scratch that out. Scratch that out. Personal space, okay? Personal space. Ooh.
We shall indulge you if you should decide to call for help.
Ishtara said back, smiling under her mask. How many years had it been since she had felt the pleasure of banding pride-laden threats with Xenos witches? Not since her last battle with that petulant little farseer. So many years ago. She was still unsure if she had actually killed that one, but the memory of contending with her and then besting her in spite of her schemes was a warm one. Ishtara abhorred the enemies of the Emperor, but she relished the sacred challenges they posed to her. Brave words. The until now silent horned Jedi said, ceasing his steps. "But will they be your last?" asked the smiling Jedi. Ishtara gripped her blade more tightly.
They shall be the last words you hear,
she affirmed, her suit creaking as it crouched into her stance just a little bit more. The Jedi did the same, blades poised and humming as the roar of war echoed all around them, but more distantly now. A gunshot was heard from nearby, and the fight took it as its cue to commence. The Jedi leapt towards her, all three, all in unison, sabers lashing out in blurs of light. Ishtara, however, was moving as well. She swung out with her blade in a wide arc, releasing it from her right hand and allowing her left to carry it across them. The first two Jedi, the horned pair who dominated the right and center, ducked under and jumped over her attack. The sword came to clash heavily against the green Jedi's blade, who was halted and forced back with a hard grunt by the effort of stopping her swing. With her free right arm, she punched straight down, nearly smashing the more human-like horned Jedi, who pulled up short with a backflip, chastening her mechanical forearm with lashes of his blue blade, though none could penetrate the armor which braced her there. The final Jedi, the demonic-seeming one, drove in straight for her center, aiming for her chest or even head. While it was true that the majority of Ishtara's armored plates would be immune to their strikes thanks to her adamantium alloys, she also knew that the joints of her suit were not so easily protected, and the charging warrior would have the option to cut her head clean from her shoulders if he could get close enough to slash her neck from the proper angle. What a thematic finish that would be, to have the Emperor's visage cast off her as she fell defeated before the vile blows of her enemies. She deeply hoped he would attempt it, as so many of her other foes had done in the past. Such hubris, such pride and arrogance was what the venerable sister was depending on for her counter to be most effective. With one arm bracing the green warrior, and her other shielding her from the blue blade bearer, Ishtara seemed completely helpless, at least to the unwary. But just as the Jedi Master drove in for her neck with his green sword of hateful light, the nozzles to either side of her head which had been cleverly disguised as shoulder-mounted ornamentation, slid open and revealed their purpose. Protected only by the make and design of her mask, yet still able to feel the blistering heat across her ancient skin, Ishtara squinted her eyes as she watched the twin jets of Prometheum-born flame issue forth, colliding with the Jedi, whose eyes widened just before it occurred, arms wrapping in defensively a mere instant before the flamers activated. The flailing
You are cooked. You are cooked.
Form of the Jedi fell away, saber dropping and cooking in the fires which enwreathed both weapon and master. He hit the ground, spasming, yet not screaming, before suddenly bellowing a roar of pain and focus, spreading his arms and legs out as a shockwave rocketed out from him, scattering the burning promethium around him, nearly catching his fellow Jedi and splashing more than a few clones,
Friendly fire, come on.
who immediately began to burn and panic. But he did not stop there. The Jedi was smoking, blackened, raising his burnt hands up, fingers and palms trembling as scorched flesh chipped and flaked away. Yet he could not see them. His eyes had been burnt too badly to endow him with anything resembling his former sight. But the burns had mostly consumed the surface of his body, leaving him with enough function left to begin screaming. The sound was a horrific song of their own defeat, staggering both Jedi at the sudden expression of their comrades' pain.
This Jedi is going to become like Lord Vader, in terms of wearing a cyborg enhancing or protective suit that protects his fragile skin, and he's going to have a mask on and everything. He's going to be a Jedi Vader type of person. Yeah. If he survives, I don't know.
But they had no time to be distracted, as Ishtara spun, blade whipping up as she turned towards the green Jedi, spewing flames at him next. Infuriatingly, he did not meet the same end as his foul kin did, extending his free hand out and splitting the twin torrents to either side of his body. Just the proximity to those flames burnt him, making the smiling Jedi finally drop his grin, exchanging it for a grimace as his robe sparked and nearly caught fire. But the river of flames ended as the blue blade-wielding Jedi spun up from behind it, acrobatically leaping over her right shoulder and throwing his saber directly into one of the fire-spewing nozzles. The promethium within detonated, destroying the weapon and damaging the warsuit in a sudden, searing explosion which sent troops of both sides flying back. The blue saber was no more, but it had not been a light exchange, as the smoke cleared to reveal Ishtara, now driven down to one knee, her right shoulder smoking and half molten from the explosion. Though her right arm appeared to still function, she could still feel even before testing it that it had become sluggish and was, at best, unreliable.
This kind of feels like a final boss mission in an RPG type of game, where you have your opponent Ishtara with her battlesuit armor, and these key vital points that you have to target to destroy them, so she becomes weaker. And her final form, if I can say that, is when she's holding her blade, and she's on her last legs, and she's so powerful, so devastating, and you have to try and beat her in that final form. Right now we're still dealing with her, maybe a second form or a first form, until she heads into a final form. Something like that, I don't know. It just feels like it's like a final mission boss game that you would play in an RPG or a fighting type of game. Yeah.
System alerts and breach alarms flared red in her retinas. Her machine spirit companion moaning and seething within her mind, pain becoming rage, and rage rapidly demanding frenzy and retribution. She clamped down on it, subduing the machine spirit with her mind and faith, forcing the machine to rise back up to its full height, but not to charge immediately. The burnt Jedi was hauled away by a pair of replique medics, and she allowed them to go, taking the victory as hers while she turned to finish addressing the surviving 2 Jedi.
I don't know. I would have taken him out. I would have finished the job. Because you can say that you've won that little contest between you and that Jedi, but he might come back one day as like a Lord Vader Jedi, and he wants revenge against you. So, beat them completely to the point where they will never be able to come back at you with revenge. It's either you beat them completely or you don't beat them at all. So you gotta finish that job. Canoness Superior.
All wounded, surrender. The green, no longer smiling Jedi Master demanded from behind his emerald blade. Ishtara laughed.
I am standing. My armor is still intact. The Emperor is still at my side. You, however, are down 1 witch, and of the 2 remaining heretics that stand before me, only one of you is actually armed any longer.
You don't need a lightsaber, you just need the Force. The Force. Or the Warp. That's it, that's all a Jedi needs.
Surrender to me, and I shall make your deaths painless, which is more than I can say for your friend.
Challenged the Canoness Superior, taking her sword in her left hand and aiming towards the pair. In response, the unarmed Jedi reached his hand out, summoning the power of the warp and pulling one of the green sabers that had belonged to the Jedi woman out from the limp grip of one of her severed arms. He seized the weapon out of the air and activated it. Perhaps we are not so worse off as you think, the green Jedi quipped, taking a stance as his newly armed compatriot did the same.
You will be, Jedi. You will be.
Ishtara hissed, taking her weapon in both hands and making her own charge this time. Stomping forward, fluid yet heavy. Her Paragon war suit was an intimidating opponent in the best of times, but the Jedi did an admirable job of keeping their cool, diving out to either side of her again. They dove out and then in, weightless under the power of the warp. The green Jedi coming in with a straight thrust from her left, the horned Jedi dashing in with a low slash from her right. Both were unprepared for the effectiveness of her own attack. The wounding of her suit, the pain in her bones from the attacks wrought onto her, had breathed into the ancient Canoness Superior a passion she had not felt in many years. It was as though the hand of the Emperor were guiding her blade, golden light spilling out from her eyes and shining past the slits of the mask she wore. Fast as lightning, and with skills sharpened against similar psychic foes, Ishtara clashed against their blades with a sudden flurry of sweeping heavy strikes. Both Jedi were sent reeling, suddenly backstepping and on the defensive, senses flummoxed by the inexplicable sensations they felt coming from their opponent. The movement speed, the strength, the precision of her blows. All of it seemed far beyond what the Jedi could expect of most non-Force sensitives.
The Emperor is with her, whispering in her ear.
And yet here they were, barely able to keep her heavy swings from cleaving them in half. Unlike their own weapons, her burning sword spilled out an incredible amount of ambient heat. And soon, both Jedi were sweating, panting hard as they backstepped away from her.
Man, like you're fighting against her, the sword is producing a lot of heat, and you have to jump, you have to dive, you have to dash, you have to do this and do that in this area of effect from this blade. Oh, this is exhausting. Oh, so much concentration is required here.
But Ishtara pursued, strikes growing harder and heavier, her steps flowing to old memories of wars won long ago. She was certain that her advantage would carry her to victory, But she did not find out as one of the clones who were watching suddenly screamed, pitching something from his hand. "For the Republic!"
Hey, he's cheating. He's cheating. Okay, all bets are off. Imperium of Men, start attacking right now. Start attacking right now. Defend the Canoness Superior. No. That clone was cheating.
He yelled as he did, throwing one of his EMP grenade spheres directly at her. Ishtara caught the weapon with her right hand.
No, you're supposed to backhand it away. Deflect it away, not... Ugh. Damn it.
Moving instinctively as her left handled her blade work. She began to reel back her fist to pitch it, but the damned replica had cooked the grenade before tossing it, and it detonated almost as soon as it touched her palm. The sphere burst into an expanding cascade of electrical energy, Ishtara releasing a scream of her own as her machine spirit writhed within her mind, contorted with horrific pain. Her Paragon warsuit tripped, falling to its knees as it lost all coordination in a sudden storm of twitching, screeching servos and disrupted systems. The Jedi, seeing their chance to strike, did so, both veering in towards the Canoness Superior's collapsed form.
Hey, what are you guys doing back there? Help the Canoness Superior!
Sabers readied. But the Green Warrior only got a couple of steps into his charge before the speeding form of an enraged Celestian warrior rocketed into his side, tackling him into the air on the blazing wings of her jump pack, and thereby carrying him out of this fight.
Bye-bye.
The other, horned Jedi was not obstructed, though all around them, the relative calm which had followed the duel between the faction leaders had completely broken, with both sides now charging the other. The green blade of the remaining Jedi Master swept in much as the first horned Jedi had, sword leading for her neck. Though her arms and legs were still twitching and useless, she still had control enough to tilt her torso up as he went to strike. Flame
And then burn him.
flames issuing from her remaining shoulder-mounted flamer and towards the attacking Witch Knight. But he was ready, splitting the torrent of fire just as the green-skinned warrior had done before. Hand outstretched as he took one step forward and then another, teeth bared in hard-fought focus. Ishtara raised a trembling mechanical arm and pointed towards him, glaring. Feeling true fury now beginning to fill her up after the Republic's duplicitous assault on their duel.
Honorless witch!
She yelled, eyes faintly glowing once more.
I deny you!
Ishtara proclaimed, the words echoing unnaturally and loudly. The Canoness Superior did not know what it felt like for these heretics to be cut off from their power. But she took great pleasure in the expression the horned man made as his connection to the warp flagged and then vanished.
How is she able to do that? Is she a blank? Or is she using some sort of blank technology on the suit? Or is it the Emperor? How is she able to do that? Okay, wow.
The protective shield, which had
Wait, why didn't she do that before? Like in the beginning? I mean, it could have really been an advantage for her when she was facing up against all three of them. Just, switch off their connection to the warp and 1, 2, 3. Bob is your uncle. They're all dead.
shrouded him collapsed into the stream of fire which proceeded to immerse him. She cut the fuel off, sight clearing to reveal the stumbling, burning, panic-ridden form of the Jedi before her. Ishtara showed him the Emperor's mercy, cutting across his screaming body with a jerky chop of her sword, dropping him into 2 ignited portions of rapidly disintegrating alien flesh. Slowly, she staggered back up to her feet, systems rebooting and recovering to the degree that they could from the dishonorable surprise attack. As she did, she raised her sword in victory, blue shots pinging and bouncing off her armor and mask without apparent effect. The battle had been rejoined, but the Imperials who did manage to bear witness to her rising, smoking form cheered and roared their adulation, alerting the others around them to her success and survival. The rallied Imperials raised their guns and weapons high before redeploying themselves with great fervor into the fight. The Emperor was with them. They could not fail. The foul, false men of the Republic's replicate armies also seemed to sense this, backing away and falling into a scrambling but organized retreat.
A scrambling but organized retreat. Organized. Why is it organized? They should be panicking. They should be running for their lives in all directions, but it's organized. Maybe they were issued retreat orders from one of the generals, because why is it organized? No.
The Imperials pursued, held back only by the admirable discipline of the enemy they fought, who never broke, always falling back under cover of their fellows, even dropping smoke grenades which gushed thick, obscuring gases and particles into the air around them. But Ishtara had no mercy to offer them, save that of the Emperor's embrace. And she dared not lay off her assault, pursuing the enemy even as they sought to escape.
With me, warriors of the Emperor! Let not a single one survive us!
She cried out through her suit speakers. Ishtara Ordain strode like a terrible, agile beast, whipping her weapon back and forth through the retreating and fighting forms of the clone soldiers. Without the Jedi there to defend them, very little of what they had to offer could stand in her way. She kicked over one of the odd crawling tanks of the Republic, servos in her ornate warsuit screeching in protest, sounding out nearly as loudly as the shearing bleat of the tank's belly being peeled and seared open by the swiping slash of her daemon-slaying blade. Around her, more of the glittering black tanks of the Obsidian Guard poured in, keeping the heavier support from addressing her, rallying around the torn and burning, but still functional form of the Bane Blade which led the armored assault. The behemoth war machine was covered in the glowing strikes of lightsaber attacks, many portions of its hull sawed open by the alien weapons, though...
No. Something is wrong here. The clone troops are retreating in an orderly fashion, if I can say that. Organized fashion, right? They have time to throw smoke grenades. The Baneblade tank is still operational. Even after the Jedi, we've been slashing it with lightsaber, attacks on it. It's still active. It's still moving around. No, there's something going on here. It's a trap. I don't know in what form, in what shape, but this feels like a trap. And it seems like the Canoness Superior and the rest of the Imperium of Man forces are so hung up in this victory against those 4 or 3 Jedi that they cannot see that this is something that is very suspicious here. Or maybe I'm paranoid, I don't know. But it just feels like a trap, guys. This feels like a trap. Trust me. Okay, I know this. It feels like a trap. No.
It seemed the Jedi had entirely retreated from the defense they met inside. The heretical knights of the so-called Republic and their armies of trained slave clones began to rapidly vacate the main avenue, retreating into alleys, buildings, and secondary branching streets, surrendering the main approach to the Imperium of Man. Very soon, there was more obscuring smoke cloaking the battlefield than there were clone soldiers contesting it.
It's a trap. It's a trap. Canoness Superior, please. Look out. Watch out. Make sure that your forces are not, too overly excited. There's something going on here.
Still, she pursued, hunting down those last holdouts in the street. Her enhanced Auspex array made the smoke meaningless for out to 30 meters in every direction. She pounced upon a group of 3 troopers, their own helmet packages clearly able to sense her as well. The soldiers turning as they ran and firing up into her. Their shots were accurate, but meaningless. Far too light to make a significant impact on even the most lightly armored portions of her armor. She crushed the first one underfoot, smashing him into 5 pieces with a single stomp.
Ew, that means it's the legs, the arms, and the head just whoosh. Well, the main body just oh wow.
Before she lunged for the last 2, sweeping her sword to dice the false humans. However, a light flared before her, a radiant purple illuminating the white and black smoke all around them as another Jedi revealed himself. A human Jedi this time, the man standing tall and powerful.
Mace Windu.
His body dotted in burns and metallic welts, yet he projected no weakness as he held her blade back with unnatural strength. His eyes glared at her, a steady, determined gaze. The frightful visage of a worthy adversary. She withdrew her strike and took a dueling stance.
4 Jedi have been felled before me. Now, you shall become the 5th.
Ishtara declared with brazen faith, lifting her burning blade and grasping it in both hands. The fiery dawn shade reflecting off the golden mask of the Emperor. You will fell nothing, and no one else. You haven't even realized it yet, but you're already defeated. The powerful master of the Jedi Order stated coldly, deactivating his purple blade and hooking it to his waist.
What are you doing? Do you believe this battle is over?
The ancient matron of war asked, incredulous, eyes darting as she looked for the trap he was surely setting. It is over. For you, he declared confidently, unable to see anything that might warn her off, and stoked into rage by his brazen arrogance. She answered his words with action, charging towards him, sword at the ready. The smoky layers parted around her, billowing out from her charging form to reveal the terror that the master must now face, unarmed. But he did not face her. She cut down, and he acrobatically swiveled to the left towards the 2 surviving troopers who were even then taking aim. He laced himself around and between them as Ishtara pulled back her blade, reeling for another strike. But before she could complete it, he had grabbed the back of the 2 troopers' armors and leapt up, the warp empowering his movement and tossing him hundreds of meters up into the air. The 2 clones dangling from either arm as he arched up towards an open window of one of the adjacent towers. Her eyes followed his movement, but as she tracked his arc, the force of his jump cleared the smoke in a vast section, revealing the burning sky above, and, more concerningly, what was quickly eclipsing it. The Canoness Superior felt as though she had taken a sudden step into the dark.
Okay, alright. So it's the ship that Combia and Javona and everybody else is, directing towards where the fighting is happening. I can't remember if Combia discussed about this, that they wanted to use this ship wreckage as a battering ram against the Imperium of Man. I can't remember if they discussed about that, but this is really going to be devastating. For the Imperium of Man, it's going to be really devastating. Hopefully Ahsoka Tano and all the other clone troops aboard the ship are safely secured and braced for impact.
And had fallen through the floor entirely. Above her, above them all, was the enormous descending shape of a broken, burning ship, carried aloft by smoking retro engines and a small fleet of teeny vessels who pulled upon it from all sides.
Nice music selection right here. AFanWithTooMuchTime. I know this soundtrack. It's good. Very good.
The intent behind this thing was clear. The Republic was about to use this ship to ram down the walls of the Basilica and crush everything and everyone else beneath it. She tapped her suit vox and began to frantically command some kind of defense.
We are deceived. They are clearing the main road because they are about to drop a falling starship through the gates of our sacred temple. All forces, clear the smoke however you can. Begin firing upon the ship and the support craft that are helping to hold it up. Shoot them down! Shoot them down!
Shoot them down!
Ishtara demanded of them, taking 2 faltering steps back as the craft began to cover the sun. In response to her words, counterfire began to answer right away, beginning blind, but getting clearer and clearer as the moments ticked by. The Obsidian Guard did the most with the time they had, using their enormous guns and purpose-made flak cannons to blast gaping holes in the already wounded ship, as well as blowing more than a few of the smaller craft out of the skies. The other supporting vessels began to break away, cutting their cords, deactivating their tractor beams, and banking up, right or left as they released their massive payload. The desperate Imperial counteroffense had forced them to drop the ship earlier than intended. But even here, Ishtara could see that it would still fall atop them.
Emperor, have mercy on their souls.
She turned and looked around, her breath coming slow, the world grinding to a near halt.
Emperor, protect your children.
She saw men running, hordes of Imperial guardsmen attempting to pry open the doors of a nearby building, only to be met with bright blue death from the clones harboring inside. She turned in the opposite direction and saw her sisters dying as they shepherded troops into an alley. They waded into the Republic forces which had been laying in wait for them, power armors deflecting and absorbing blaster bolts, but failing against the touch of the lightsabers which were among them. The precognitive witches aiding in the defense to deadly effect. They had not been retreating, she realized. They had been boxing her forces in.
From the lightning and the tempest, our Emperor, deliver us.
Yes, Emperor, deliver them, please. This is funny.
Began to pray, holding tight the Tabahaiv and raising it defiantly.
From plague, deceit, temptation, and war.
Deliver us.
Our Emperor, deliver us.
Tanks and soldiers ran and rolled past her, attempting, largely in vain, to outdistance the falling column of death which was rapidly descending upon them all.
Emperor, protect your sons and daughters from this heinous act, from these witches and their heretic clones. Protect them, Emperor. Deliver them, Emperor. Amen. Or is it Ave Imperator?
Even the smoke which coated the battlefield began to flee with them. Winds kicked up by the changing pressure in the air, whipped into existence thanks to the mere approach of the massive ship's descent. But she strode towards it, blade glowing in her hands, fear entirely departed from her body and soul.
From the scourge of the Kraken, our Emperor, deliver us.
She intoned as the deepest part of the shadow of the ship began to swallow her. Ishtara's only regret was that she would die in failure. But she would not die running away. Ishtara would die with her face to the sky, not her back.
Okay, Ishtara, but why not, instead of running back or facing your back towards that ship, just run to the side. You're not facing on the back, you're on the side, and just run to the side You know, let that ship crash. You are okay. You can still lead your forces, who is ever remaining from this catastrophe. Okay, don't just stand there and accept this ship just going to squish you like some sort of insect. No. Come on. Just run to the side. You don't have to face the back, just run to the side. That's it. That's it. And you'll make it. You're in that battle suit. I'm sure it can, cover the distance before that ship crashes. Come on.
The Canoness was prepared to accept that end, but others were not. One such other came, stomping towards her from her left, the ground quaking and shaking so hard that, for a moment, Ishtara assumed some part of the vessel must be meeting the earth even now. But it was not that, as was revealed a moment later when she turned to look to her side, seeing the enormous hand of the Knight Mechanicus reaching down as it ran past her.
Never? Never! Hopefully you can make it.
Ishtara braced, crossing her arms, and had the Canoness not been enwrapped within her sacred armor, the maneuver likely would have broken all her bones. As it was, the swiping, unpowered power fist's grapple upon her body left her jarred and painfully curled as the fleeing walker gathered her up in its one-digited hand. It ran at a full titanic sprint towards the gates of the basilica, thundering and leaping as needed to clear scores of fleeing soldiers and tanks. But the shadow of the ship overtook them all. The ground began to buckle and shake in a way even the night could not emulate. The falling vessel half collapsing, half grinding as its massive body finally crashed down into the avenue, and all the Imperials still trapped upon its surface.
This is reminding me of StarCraft. With the Queen of Blades cinematic, and you'd see a ship crash landing on a planet and it would explode and just utter devastation. Yeah, it's reminding me of that cinematic with the Queen of Blades. Yeah. I am the Swarm.
Some managed to fight their way off the street. Others escaped by shooting their way into the surrounding buildings. But most were caught in the Republic's trap. Ishtara and her gargantuan guardian among them.
Hey, look who's the big boy. Admiral Spikes. No longer captain. He's an admiral right now. Congratulations, Spikes. Let me just write it down here. Okay.
It's confirmed, Admiral. The Pride is breaking apart. Came the solemn report from the sensors operator. How? How is that even possible? How the frack did they pierce those kinds of shields? It shouldn't be possible. It shouldn't even be. The first officer began to rant and rave, his face rigid as he shuffled back a step or two.
First officer, you're going to be surprised, with the Imperium of Man forces multiple times. So I suggest you get over this. Yes, the pride of the Corps is gone. We move on. You move on. You have to move on.
Get a hold of yourself, Pin. With or without the Pride, we still have a job to do, said the cold, controlled voice of Admiral Spikes. The officer turned all at once to regard the odd, helmed clone. What had been a quirk as a captain was turning into his trademark as an admiral. In a navy largely composed of clone officers and thus identical faces, the man who bucked the trend by continuing to wear a trooper's helmet stood out from the crowd. Throw in that he was the only man to achieve any real success in a naval conflict with the Imperium, and the soil of history became ripe for his legend. But, legend or not, Pin could not see how Spikes intended to proceed now that their trump card was burning and falling to pieces in the void of space. How could they possibly recover from this? How could they even manage to claw out a victory from these kinds of monsters? Sir, with all due respect, how are we supposed to beat them like this? First Officer Pin protested. We are not. Our job isn't to defeat the entire Imperial Navy. It's to hold it here, in place, while the main fleet repositions itself in adjacent systems. If we can hold them, then the fleet will be able to use the Lagrange points in system for hyper-precise assault jumps. We need those jumps, Pin. It's the only way to negate their range advantage on our ships. Spikes corrected, resting his hand under his hidden chin as he eyed the holographic display on the central console before him. He had a lot more to manage this time. Every element of the victory fleet that was present, and that would soon arrive, were ostensibly under his command. Though, he was under orders to obey the Oracle Coordinator who was masterminding the larger strategy. The clone admiral of the victory fleet had been given the option to hang back with the rest of the larger armada. But Spikes knew the whole battle could well hinge on their ability to pin the Imperials in this location until the main engagement could begin. And he would not trust something that important to anyone else. We can hold them for the 20 minutes the armada needs to arrive. It's far from impossible. The newly appointed admiral muttered. Maybe, at the cost of all of our lives. Pin said back, drawing a sharp glare from Spike's shielded face. The sudden jerk of the Admiral's head communicating the emotion, even if his expression did not. Not if I can help it. Get a grip, First Officer. We are not retreating from this fight, and we are not going to be sacrificed to win it.
The team, did the Oracle team also get that memo that you guys are not going to be sacrificial pawns in this mission? Because, well, you guys don't know this, but, you know, the Oracle team think that they're playing a game. They think that this is a game. They don't know that they're actually, you know, commanding real officers on real battleships in a real battle situation right now. So they're going to use you guys as sacrificial pawns, you know, in order to win the game, essentially. They're going to sacrifice you guys.
Admiral Spikes asserted harshly. Yeah, sorry, Admiral. Pin stuttered, assuming a more proper, straight-backed posture. Spikes said nothing, only nodding and resuming his pondering. He well understood the man's concerns. They had been given minimal ships to accomplish their appointed task, with the Mandator 2s having been meant to pick up the slack. It really was almost as if the Coordinator had chosen their numbers and complements as sacrificial pieces on a vast board.
You don't say.
But even they, whoever they were, could not have predicted how quickly the first of the Mandators would fall to the viciousness of the enemy. But Spikes had. The Admiral had not known how, but he knew the moment they brought ships as disproportionately large as the Mandators into the fight, they would become the center of the Imperial counterattack, and thus subject to any number of weapons the Republic simply did not understand or know about. And while Spikes could not predict what those weapons might be, he could predict that, if they were at all effective, the outcome would be roughly the same. Powerful as the Mandators were, he felt far safer within the ambiguity of his Victory-class Star Destroyer, one of hundreds or even thousands which now closed in around the Imp fleet. Look at the way their ships are laid out. The main guns are mounted in rows along their sides, or in forward-facing mountings. They have nothing to cover their underbellies, rears, or topsides. Spikes said,
No. You're just seeing the biggest weapons on the ship. Those that are on the sides and on the bow of the vessel. There are weapons under the ship and on top of the ship. It's just that they're not so big and prominent for you to actually see them. But they're there. You know, these types of ships are bristling with weapons all over. Yeah. Don't underestimate them, Spikes.
Indicating towards a zoomed-in hologram of one of the larger enemy battlecruisers. Respectfully, sir, that's not true. Look at all these turrets. Those ships are virtually covered in guns. The first officer said, releasing one of the arms he kept folded behind his back to point towards what he meant. The hologram highlighted the many mobile slug-thrower turrets which thorned the entire ship, bristling from the ends of countless cathedral spires, and spitting death from just as many squat emplacements. Those are point defense turrets, meant for smaller ships. The sheer number of them may allow them to damage or even destroy some of our star destroyers, but they are within tolerance of our standard shield ratings.
Imagine being taken out by point defense weapons. Ooh, that's just embarrassing.
That means they can't destroy us nearly as effectively as the oversized armaments they have on these mountings. Send directions to all ships in the Victory Fleet. We need to use our size and numbers to our advantage. Those Imperial ships are likely used to contending with ships of a similar size to their own. Ships that could not easily hide in those blind spots. But we can. Our fleet is to stay off their right and left flanks and never approach or attack from the front. Assault them only from behind, above, and below. The Admiral announced, his orders being rapidly relayed, but he was not done yet. Keep a 50-kilometer spread between ships at all times. Their larger weapons can destroy our vessels in a single blast, so let's mitigate that by making sure they don't take out more than one at a time. Use their own massive ship hulls as cover from each other, staying in the blind spots. With any luck, other Imperials trying to support their entrapped ships will be forced to choose between potentially firing on their own or abandoning the attack. If
I hear the plan. I do. However, if this was a naval battle, if this was a battle on sea, I would understand. But this is in space. And these ships have retro booster engines, for directional travel in space. And they can flip the ship around in any direction, either up or down or just rotation. That's it. They can do that. So for you to have your vessels under the ship doesn't really mean that you can destroy that vessel, the Imperium of Man vessel. They can just flip their ship around and have their broadside weapons to target your vessel and destroy it. Any vessel at the top, they just need to just spin again and they just focus their main broadside weapons and destroy the ships that were targeting the cruiser from above. From behind, I'm not entirely sure. You might have an advantage there, but again, they can just activate their retro booster engines to flip the ship around and have the bow weapons target the ship that's been targeting them from behind. So, yes, on the ocean, I can understand that working, but in space, no. Yeah, it's just not going to work. I don't think so.
any of our ships sustain damage from the Imperial main weapons fire and survive, they have my leave to use the Lagrange points for a tactical retreat. We gain nothing by throwing our veterans away. Sir, sorry to interrupt, but we're getting a data stream from the Pride of the Corps. It seems to have sent something out fleet-wide before it was hit, said the communications officer, speaking from one of the sunken crew pits that sat to either side of the Admiral. What did they send? Spikes asked. Well, it appears they sent a large amount of sensor and ship system data, and what appears to be a set of recordings from the bridge security cams. Maybe they were trying to warn us about what the Imperials did to take them down? The officer said. Right, Pin, go check that out. Get back to me with what seems important so we can adjust accordingly. Spikes said. Aye, sir. Pin responded with a salute, turning to leave, but being held back for a moment as Spikes raised his hand to stop him. And Pin, don't let anything you see shake you. Too many of our brothers are relying on us, the Admiral said, receiving a stiff but determined nod from his first officer before the clone continued on his way. Outside their ship, the battle raged, searing and burning the void as the many formations of the Republic ships began to adjust and alter themselves in accordance with Admiral Spikes' orders. Their tight groupings spread out as their nearly insect-like swarms of capital ships began to harbor and cluster in the shadows and eaves of the enemy vessels. And, for a moment, the maneuvers seemed to be working effectively, the Republic fleet sheltering themselves from all the main weapons deployed by the Imperial ships they were targeting. And then, the first of the Imperial ships began its countermeasure maneuvers. The massive cruiser's retro thrusters firing, propelling it into a gargantuan roll.
Exactly.
Like some kind of seaborne beast of unimaginable size.
Now, for you to counteract this type of maneuver that the Imperium of Man ships are commencing, is to follow that rotation. You have to follow the ship. As it rotates, you rotate as well. You keep your ship on the underbelly of the cruiser. You know, you don't just stay in a stationary position and watch the ship rotating and targeting its main guns on you. So when the ship rotates, you rotate with it. You keep up with it. If you can't keep up with it, then you're in trouble. You're in danger because those cannons will target you and destroy you. So those who have motion sickness, you should not be here. if you have motion sickness and you're part of the Republic or the Imperium of Man, you should not be in space because it's going to be very confusing. Just having to be in a ship that's rotating like 360, for who knows how long, just fighting against the enemy. So yeah, the only way for them to keep themselves under the ship is to maintain the same sort of speed and rotation that the cruiser is producing. Yeah, hopefully you guys understood what I said there. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, let's continue.
The Republic ships attempted to move, to remain in its blind spots. But the thing was not just attempting to turn. It was engaging in a consistent spin, and its twirling guns overtook the fleet as it gained speed. It ruthlessly unloaded a full broadside enfilade into the swarms which had been harrying it with each twisting pass of its guns. Other ships began to push away at full burn, their engines blazing like miniature stars as they attempted to outpace the fleets in their blind spots, making wide turning arcs to bring them about and resume the offensive. Cannons and weapons the size of acclimator assault ships screamed silently through the void. Republic vessels shattering and burning at nearly every contact, unable to survive the force of their strikes at this kind of range. Other, slower Imperial vessels began to angle themselves to attack Republic ships which were targeting other Imp cruisers. Both vessels coordinating together to force the Republic ships into vulnerable angles. Frag, their naval command knows what they're doing. Luckily, so do we. Relay the following orders to the fleet. Use tractor beams to latch on to running Imperial vessels. That combined with full engine support should keep them from being able to outdistance us. Deploy starfighter squadrons to target the maneuvering thrusters and engines of the Imps. The less maneuverable we can make them, the more survivable our situation becomes.
Okay, I did not think about this. Yes, this is also possible. Using your starfighters to disable the maneuvering thrusters as well as the main drive engine of the ship. Yes, that can definitely work. Yeah, I agree with it.
If they catch your ships in a competent crossfire, change targets, do not hold your positions. Scatter if you need to, and seek safety. Now, subgroups 30 through 40, on me. We're going.
The issue is that, the ship is bristling with all types of weaponry systems, even point defense. So the starfighters are really going to have an issue here. And I'm assuming that, the Imperium of Man Forces vessels still have their shields up. So it's going to be a bit difficult to do a sortie against a cruiser's maneuvering thrusters and its main drive engine. But good luck.
Going to provide some cover for our brothers. The clone admiral relayed, folding his arms behind his back, standing straight on the bridge of his warship, ready to give his life for the Republic. The captain of the Tangelus is wondering what you mean by provide some cover. The comms officer said, In response, Spikes pointed at the burning, broken wreckage of the Pride of the Core. "There's our cover. Tell the following ships to fall in and prepare to perform a Spikes wall maneuver. The Pride can still help us yet, especially now that it's been broken."
Spikes wall maneuver. Wait, let me write that down. He's done this maneuver before. During the first encounter against the Imperium of Man, he did something similar when he used the wreckage of, I think it was of a cruiser, one of the Star Destroyers or Venator, or it was the Atlas of Steel that he used as cover for his vessels to get a bit closer to the Imperium of Man vessels so that they can have a close quarter combat situation with them. Yeah, I can't remember what wreckage did he use, whether it was part of the Republic or the Imperium of Man. And he's doing the same maneuver here. Okay. Spikes wall maneuver. Oh, nice maneuver.
He said, Spikes' Victory-class Star Destroyer flew at maximum speed towards the wreckage, mostly ignored by the engaged Imperial vessels all around them, even as more and more Victory and Venator-class Star Destroyers joined his formation. They created a wide, overlapping wing, arcing in towards the still flickering, sparking wreckage of the Pride of the Core, and activating their tractor beams in unison. With savage efficiency, Spike's ships tore away chunks of the disintegrating hull, moving in squads and groups to heft and haul the pieces of the once mighty battleship. They moved the vast fragments, first gradually, but then with growing speed as momentum aided their tugging and pushing. Tall slices of the hull and ship innards gliding alongside the traveling Republic vessels, and sliding between groups of vulnerable Republic starships. Spikes and the ships which aided him separated the smaller craft from the brutal spaceborne war engines of the Imperium with what effectively amounted to being walls of hardy junk. The cataclysmic blasts of their weapons were curtailed and muffled, colliding with the corpse shards of the Pride of the Core, molten torrents of unshielded metal spilling like starry glowing blood into space, but sparing the ships which hid behind them. Like honored shield bearers during a dread siege, Spikes and his selected fleet groupings continued to do their duty, placing themselves between the worst of the fighting and even returning to the drifting, dead ship, and daring the ire of the enormous Imperial flagship in order to retrieve more pieces. In conjunction with their starfighter support, focus fire tactics, and evasive maneuvers, the sudden decimation of their holding fleet was slowed, and for a brief time, it was even halted. But that did not last too long, as the Imperials continued their intelligent counter-coordination, at times ramming through the impromptu shields and scattering organized fleet groupings as they tore through the spaces they once occupied, crushing tens of ships upon their armored prows, even as their guns eviscerated the smaller vessels out of existence. Still, some survived those kinds of impacts, ships limping, bleeding the luck that had saved them, and often for long enough to do as instructed, fleeing the battle to live and fight another day. Yet, not all ships did escape, and of those who stayed after suffering those near-fatal injuries, at least one chose to remain. Captain Torch's ship should be pulling away from the fight. "What are they doing?" asked Admiral Spikes. "Checking. Come in, Captain Torch. You and your ship have been ordered to retreat from the field. Are you suffering technical difficulties? Do you require an aided evacuation?" asked the comms officer. Captain Torch's voice was then heard over the speakers, the resolution scratchy and filled with static, hinting at the damage his Victory class had already suffered. His words made Spikes bristle. "Negative on that, Vengeance. We don't need any help," he responded. "Then why have you not departed the system?" the comms operator followed up. "Because our duty is not done yet. We came to this fight to sink Imperials, and we'll be damned if we don't do everything in our power to make that happen." he said through a haze of communication disturbances. "Admiral, Chrono radiation traces are coming out from the Reverence of Justice. Captain Torch is preparing a hyperspace jump, but he's not clear of obstruction."
Deja vu. Deja vu. I've seen this all before. I've seen this all before. Wow. So, who are you targeting?
"The Reverence is heading straight for the Imperial flagship," yelled the sensors operator. "What? Patch me through directly," Spikes yelled. "Patching? You're on, Admiral," reported the clone manning the comm station. "Reverence of Justice, this is Admiral Spikes of the Vengeance. I am directly ordering you to turn back. Do not engage that warship. I repeat, break away from your attack vector, now!"
The music.
He bellowed. "No can do, sir. That monster tore the pride of the Corps apart. It's about time we return the favor. What's the sacrifice of one ship when compared to the stakes of the whole battle? We have to do this," was Torch's response. "Starfighters and escape pods are scrambling out from the Reverence. It's going to jump. Scans of the Imperial flagship show that it's ignoring them."
I don't think this is going to work a second time, you know. I think Admiral Roller and the Imperium of Man now understand, you know, what this maneuver is. Jumping into hyperspace, ramming into a vessel. They've seen what happened to the Atlas of Steel. I don't think they're going to just allow this to happen again for a second time. But let's see. I don't expect Roller to die here. I don't.
Said the sensors operator. "Of course it would. What is the shield strength on that Imperial battleship? Are the shields still down?" Spikes asked. "Checking. No. Shield strength has been steadily restoring itself ever since they completed their ram. It has raised back up from 21% to something closer to 60%.
Hey, you're going to ram the ship when its shields are up at 60%? Nah, man. Please, back down. Stand down. Don't do this.
Based on the energy output. Damn it! Torch, break off right now! I am not sacrificing you or any of your crew for a shot in the dark. The ship's shields are still up. We have no idea if a ram would even..." Spikes began to order, fuming.
Wait a minute. The Atlas of Steel, was its shields up when they exited out of the warp? And when they were rammed by that Venator? Were their shields up or were they down? I can't remember if AFanWithTooMuchTime discussed about that. I'm not entirely sure. And even the Supremacy in that Star Wars movie, when it was rammed by the Radis, its shields were up, weren't they? I can't remember.
No better time to find out, sir. We are in position. This is goodbye. It's been an honor, Admiral, said Torch. "No! Fragging, stop this madness! Torch, I'll see you court-martialed for this! You're disobeying a direct order! Break away now!"
That court-martial will only be effective on him in the afterlife. He'll wait for you. He'll wait for you by the Emperor's side, you know, awaiting judgment by the Emperor. He'll be there. When you die, you'll also be there, and you guys can discuss about it.
The Admiral roared, composure lost. "Unless you're planning on hosting that court-martial in hell, I don't think I'll be able to attend. Don't sound so concerned, Spikes. I was never really that good a soldier anyway," was Torch's lax reply. "Torch, Spikes began to say, but then there was a flash. "They're ramming!" yelled the sensors operator, and they all watched as the Reverence of Justice flared for a moment before stretching and snapping into a hyperspace jump. There was a brilliant burst of light and high-intensity radiation,
Roller,
blinding them all for a second or two, all but Spikes, who watched through the filter of his helmet, eyes bulging in his skull as he beheld the results of his subordinate's suicide.
It failed. She's still here.
The light dimmed and vanished, yet the Imperial battleship remained, untouched. An opaque shell of purple energy swirling and dazzling around the gargantuan vessel like the shell of a demonic egg.
Man, those shields are quite impressive. The fact that they can actually deflect a ship that's entering into hyperspace. Well done, Admiral Roller.
Impossible! The gunnery officer breathed from his station. The whites of his eyes lined in bloodshot red as he stared into the unbelievably resilient ship. Admiral, the energy output on the Imperial flagship's shields. The sensor's operator muttered. How depleted are they after that maneuver? Spikes asked, defeat tainting his voice, but already he was redirecting his mind. Torch had created a tragedy out of himself, but maybe an opportunity as well. If his insane ramming maneuver had managed to at least weaken the shields around the enemy vessel, then maybe they could finish what he started. They've doubled, came the aghast response from the sensor clone.
How? How did they double? This is crazy. Are you telling me that the hyperdrive, the ship that entered into hyperdrive ramming the ship somehow energized the shields of Admiral Roller's vessel? Doubled the power level? Wow.
What? How? Spikes yelled back. I don't know. Shield output appears to be no less than 120%. The Imperial barrier shields have gotten much thicker, seemingly as a result of coming into contact with their hyperwaves. I'm sorry, sir. I just don't understand what I'm seeing. These readings look like those we get from singularities. I just don't understand. The man continued to report, eyes trembling in his skull as they darted from reading to reading, none of them making any conventional sense.
Singularity? Okay.
Incoming transmission from... Wait. That isn't even possible.
Wait a minute. What is this? It looks like... It looks like space, but in inverted colors, if I can say that. You know, space is white, and then the stars are black. That is so weird. This is just throwing me off. It's so weird. Ugh.
Said the comms operator. A moment later, the transmission was received and played over the open channel, sending chills and shivers through all who could hear it. Admiral, what's happening? Our ship has engaged hyperdrives, but this doesn't look like hyperspace.
You guys are in the warp? So you're telling me that the ship that entered into hyperspace and bombarded on the shields of Admiral Roller's ship somehow opened a rift for them to enter into the warp? Is this intentional by Roller and her officers aboard her vessel, or is this a mistake? Wow. And if this is the warp, this is scary. This is weird, really. The way it looks. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in that situation. And they don't have Gallowfields. The Republic vessel. It doesn't have any Gala shields, protecting them from the environment of the warp. So what's going to happen to them? Oh gosh.
Said the distorted voice of Captain Torch. Captain, can you hear me? What's your status? What's your location? Spikes answered, voice dripping with desperate awe. I don't know. The ship's engines blew out. The lost captain began to reply, the distortions growing as his broadcast weakened. I'm losing his signal, Admiral. reported the comms operator. Torch! We're losing you! Tell us where you are! Give us coordinates! Spikes yelled.
Coordinates are unknown. We're surrounded by black stars. Readings show unidentified ships approaching. They're coming from all sides. We're going to attempt to...
Demons?
Was his final transmission before it all devolved into incomprehensible static. We've lost him, sir, said the sensors operator, cutting the comms feed.
Guys, I would rather die quick from that hyperspace ramming than to go into the warp without a galley field. No.
Damn it! Contact all the other ships in the fleet. Tell them not to even attempt any stunt like that. It won't work against whatever shield system the imps are using. Send them a recording of what we just witnessed as well. I don't want any more of my captains getting bad ideas. Spikes ordered, turning to his left as First Officer Pin returned, looking frazzled but maintaining his composure. What did you find for me, Pin? Spikes asked as the man arrived at his side. Nothing good, Admiral, but I think I know exactly how the Imperials managed to destroy the Pride of the Corps, he said, extending the datapad he clutched in his hand. Spikes took it, eyes scanning the report before widening. Are you absolutely certain about this? He asked Pin, who nodded stiffly in response. All right, get me in contact with the other two mandators who are with us right now, and transmit a copy of everything I'm about to tell them back to the Oracle. They are going to want to know about this.
Intermission. Okay. Man, that ship, the crew aboard that ship, I feel sorry for them. I really do. Oh. Wait, let me get some water. I'll be right back. Okay, let's continue.
Place to go. Have no place to go. Darling, have no place to go. Have no place to go. Goodbye, baby. Yes, I'm going. Yes, I'm going. Goodbye, baby. Yes, I'm going. Yes, I'm going.
Sorry, just had a call. Okay, let's get back to it.
Darling, how lonely you go. How lonely you go.
Well, if you leave the planet before the exterminatus consumes the entire planet, I'm sure it's possible.
Darling, how lonely you go. How lonely you go. Darling, how lonely you go. How lonely you go. Darling, how lonely you go. How lonely you go. Darling, when that train roll up and out, I come walking out. Come walking out. When that train roll up and out, I come walking out. Come walking out.
Hey, brother, what you thinking? Leave that on record spinning. You feel the rhythm going. Legs ain't got time to lay low. Your knees are bending, so it's time to get up and let go. Hey, mama, how's it going? Can see your body moving. Don't leave the party dying. Keep booty shaking, you know you have.
Nice answer. AFanWithTooMuchTime. Nice answer right there.
Has no right to say no. Tonight it's ready, set, go. Baby, can you move around the rhythm so we can get with into the round and get us a rock and roll round? Down, down, body, body, coming with the super hottie, let's go. No, so hell no. Baby, can you move around the rhythm? Cause you know I'm living in the fast lane. Speed up, it ain't no game. Just turn up all the beams when I come up on the scene. Hey, brother, what you thinking? That good old sound is ringing. They don't know what they're missing. Legs ain't got time to lay low. Your knees are bending, so it's time to get up and let go. Hey, brother, listen steady. Put down your drink, you ready. It's hot when things get messy. Keep booty shaking, you know your head has no right to say no. Tonight it's ready, set, go. Baby, can you move around the rhythm so we can get with into the round and get us a rock and roll round? Down, down, body, body, coming with the super hottie, let's go. No, so hell no. Baby, can you move around the rhythm? Cause you know I'm living in the fast lane. Speed up, it ain't no game. Just turn up all the beams when I come up on the scene.
The Canoness Superior. Hopefully she's okay. She's not too badly injured from that catastrophe. And of course Nerva. Man, when are we going to hear about her? When are we going to hear about her? Hopefully she's also okay.
Ishtara awoke in agony, yet was surprised that she awoke at all. Her machine spirit roused with her, returning to functionality with the waking of her human mind. and the first thing it sensed was the devastation wrought upon its own body. The Canoness shook her head, clearing her mind and vision of the many red warnings and flashing system alarms, taking stock of herself personally. She was still wrapped in the enormous fist of the Imperial Knight, though now all was still, but not quite silent. The distant rumble and roar of battle was present, but only as a vague hum in the air, not near wherever she was. Finding her arms and legs still worked, but that several of her own bones were broken. She grunted in stark agony as the Canoness Superior braced her limbs against the fingers which entrapped her, gradually pushing the protective cage open. Wherever she was, it was dark, lacking any light that did not come from the lamps which activated on her suit. This included the collapsed form which loomed over her, the dead and now still shape of the Knight Preceptor, the faithful flame. It was curled over her protectively, half its body and all of its legs shorn away, its torso half crushed by the effort of resisting and penetrating the hull of the ship. And that was where they were, Ishtara realized. The bottom of the ship which had landed upon them, the knight's hard carapace and whatever remained of its ionic shield having been just enough to breach this portion of its hull, and push them both into the belly of the felled beast.
Yes, but is never okay too.
Ishtara finished her staggering gait, straightening herself as she leaned against the cold, dark skin of the knight which had saved her, seeing her holy blade embedded in its thumb and drawing the sword forth. It flicked to life at her touch, hot and radiant, and with it in hand, the Canoness strode to the nearest wall, dragging her body by sheer will and grit alone, and
Or maybe Nova is not in this Imperial Knight. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Okay. Sorry, I finished too much time. Let's continue, sorry.
plunging the Tabahaiv into the barrier,
Tabaiv.
beginning to slice herself free. Every movement was breathtakingly painful, every effort one which was already in deficit of her capacity. But the enemy had dropped an entire warship on her, and her sisters likely thought her dead or lost. A misconception she could not allow to exist. Metal streaming away in burnt and molten rivulets, and bending under the shaky but powerful limbs of the Paragon warsuit, she pried open a way to the outside. The din of battle immediately swelling to a far louder cacophony, but not as loud as she would have liked. Stepping out from the smashed underside of the ship, she saw that the disaster which had befallen their forces had not seen fit to cease at the crashing of the ship. Loose pockets of surviving Imperials fought back to back, most utterly and hopelessly surrounded by the enemy. Those who had retreated before now returned with a horrific vengeance, spilling into the streets like fire from a flamer nozzle, and pouncing upon the recovering warriors of the Emperor. All the while, new enemies composed of even more Republic replicae began to disembark from the crashed ship, exiting from the top levels to snipe and fire down upon the vulnerable forces of mankind from their positions high above. And leading them was another demonically horned Jedi. A woman this time, her skin an unnatural orange, inked with white, her head crowned with large horns and unnatural tendrils.
Ahsoka Tano. You're a demon, Ahsoka. Oh gosh.
Ishtara stepped forward and then lurched into the side of the ship, slamming into it and supporting herself upon its enormous bulk. Her breath came heavy, her mind filled with so much agony that it left little room for anything else. But her duty called her forward, and with stumbling, quaking feet, she began to make her way up the ship. She needed to find her sisters. She needed to rejoin the fight. But as she pulled herself along the wall of the craft, edging closer and closer towards the basilica, there finally came a time where all she could do was progress. The world fading from her, replaced by the domination of the focus it took for her to put one foot in front of the other. Ishtara ordains agony, born of so many broken bones and so much bruised flesh, grew to eclipse the entirety of the world around her, leaving her blind to her foe until she had come upon them. The Canoness Superior was woken from her unwitting stupor by the sudden approach of a sound. A roaring which was much louder and much closer than anything recently around her. She halted and, with great pain, turned to the left to look toward the origin of the sound. Before her was another intersecting avenue, a sudden and solid branch from the main road which was just as large, going out across the planet-wide city in its own grid. And this interconnected avenue was not vacant. Upon it, hundreds of thousands of men and women were crowded, some dressed in armors and uniforms of various natures and styles, while others wore street or work clothing, eyes shaded by welding glasses, full helmets, and dark, sharp glasses.
It's the Axum civilians who have come out to fight. The rebels. Those damn rebels.
All in one enormous crowd. Among them were men and women hovering on floating bikes, car-like speeders, and open-topped variants upon which were mounted all kinds of weapons. And that was the one thing they all shared in common. Whether on foot or in a vehicle, whether rich or poor, armored or dressed casually, every single one of the beings before her, from the human-like to the utterly alien, were armed.
For Axum!
These were the rebellious people of Axum, come like ravens to pick over the spoils of the Republic's sacrifices. Ishtara knew what their presence meant, knew that they would not break their charge, which approached her even now. But she also knew that she would meet it. And for as long as she could, she would fight it. Harnessing her strength, she pushed off from the ship, mechanical legs stuttering and shaking from their own damage.
Tabaiv, burn, cut down, in the Emperor's name. Oh gosh, sorry guys, I'm sorry. Let's just continue.
Her arms adopted a similar quaking movement, even as she held her own broken limbs still and steady. The machine body failing before her own did. The machine spirit wept its agony into her, but it did not weaken, not by choice. Taking her blade in both hands
the music.
One last time, Ishtara raised the Tabahaiv, firmed her voice, and began to pray.
From the blasphemy of the fallen, our Emperor, deliver us.
Deliver us.
From the begetting of demons, our Emperor, deliver us.
Deliver us.
From the curse of the mutant, our Emperor, deliver us.
Deliver us.
She intoned as the hordes approached, countercharging them as she did. Many halted, beginning to fire into her with a far more varied arsenal than that which she had faced until now. The cracking, burning touch of their alien weapons breaking apart her already sundered armor. And yet, many others continued forward, running and shooting, or wielding melee weapons, most of which were derived from things like building and mining equipment. She met them first.
Really? You guys are going up against her with... But you know, this is the People's Rebellion. You know, they don't have lightsabers. They don't have the Taba'ayiv. They don't have anything. They only have what they've been working with in their civilian life. So, yeah, good luck.
Refusing to halt, even as pain rose to blind her, funneling it by means of several lifetimes of training into raw power.
That thou wilt bring them only death. That thou shouldst spare none. That thou should pardon none. We beseech thee, destroy them.
Ishtara Ordain declared, voicing the words as her sword sang death through the ranks of her enemies.
I mean, look at this image, guys. Look at all the dead bodies on the floor. Gosh. This is terrible.
Her blade swept over and across the maddened rebels, the untrained, idealistic upstarts failing to realize their doom was upon them until it was too late. The divine warsuit, even staggered as it was, scythed through them like a harvester's tool, reaping death in breathtaking succession. She finished the close ranks which had come near her with a gout of flame from her remaining flamer. The stream of fire lasting only a couple of seconds, the tank on her back having been cracked and leaking out most of its remaining fuel within the ship. But even those mere moments saw hordes of the upstarts emulating and screaming, begging for the Emperor's mercy. But she had no time for mercy, not even among them, maintaining her focus as much as she could on the existing and threatening combatants. She broke the front ranks, charging through even more pain as the next line of citizen soldiers opened fire into her,
For Axum!
blowing chunks out of even more of her faltering armor. But it would not be enough. Luckily for them, they had even more to reveal. A horrifying secret which Ishtara had not known to even suspect until now.
What could that be? Is it a weapon? Okay.
A shape charged past the front ranks, a blur of movement, fangs and teeth. It came to confront her, throwing Ishtara back with a savage tackle. The Canoness Superior shook her head, focusing her scattering vision, but not quickly enough to raise her weapon in defense of herself.
Fangs and teeth? Nah, man. Nah. This is a tyrannid. This is a tyrannid. Oh, gosh.
The beast before her swiped its claws at her, and while the venerable warrior was able to duck to her left, the creature's impossibly sharp claws still managed to clip off the entire right arm of her paragon suit, losing her sword with it. She stumbled to her feet, shielding herself from the rain of fire pelting her with her remaining arm, her legs receiving even more damage and falling from under her, bringing her down to her knees. All the while, the beast before her reared back up, flexing its four powerful insectoid arms. Ishtara knew exactly what this was, and the knowledge of it made her blood run cold.
Gene Stealer abomination.
She growled, trying to rally her strength once more, but the armor now failed her, the legs useless under her weight. The horrible thing seemed to grin with its long, sharp teeth, its mouth stretching wide across its hideous, inhuman face. She tried to blast it with a cone of flame, but there was nothing left in her Prometheum tank to use, and the sparking fires did little more than flicker and sputter from the remaining weapon. The monster even seemed to mock her with an alien chuckle then, before dashing forward on four limbs, raising its upper two to strike.
Guys, imagine a tyrannid laughing at you. No, man, that's crazy. That's crazy. Like, I want to hear it. That'll just be so weird and so funny at the same time. I wouldn't be able to take it seriously. Really. No. Okay.
Ishtara did not close her eyes, meeting her end without any fear. And so she saw clearly as a ball of faith and fire rocketed down, a seraph of the Emperor himself, manifesting both grace and fury in the form of the Canoness Superior's own adopted daughter, Leandra.
Leandra? The Leandra who was fighting on those juggernauts and killing all those clone troops? That Leandra? Oh. Yeah, no, you adopted the right person. Canoness Superior. You adopted the right person to be your daughter. Definitely.
Cleaved down with her own, more conventional power sword, severing the foul alien's upper limbs as she sailed past it and collided with the ground, producing a potent shockwave in the process. And she was not alone. Other Celestians crashing down all around them amidst the crowds of heretics, and around their fallen leader, ready to fight to their last faltering breath, 6 in total. Her daughter roared, charging out of the smoking crater she had created, chasing the still advancing, yet wounded Genestealer she had already struck. It hissed and spat a glob of caustic acid towards her, causing the Canoness to twirl as she charged, footwork compensating for the maneuver as she evaded the attack. In the meantime, the Genestealer continued its charge, heading straight for Ishtara Ordain, seeking to destroy her as though doing so would destroy the Emperor himself. But the creature never made it, struck from the side by Leandra's sword, the power blade burying itself deep into the grotesque purple and green flesh of the abomination. She continued to charge, roaring as she did, pushing the beast off to the side and driving it down into the ground.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Did you just call a Tyranid the B word? Okay. Instead of calling it an abomination or something else, you call it the B word? Wow, okay. Leandra.
Leandra growled before tearing her sword up through the alien's torso, cutting and burning through the screaming, hellish thing until at last her blade erupted from the top of its head. The monster convulsed and twitched upon the ground, but in spite of its persistent biology, it was dead. With her task done, Leandra turned to her mother, running to her and trying to help support her weight.
Mother!
She said in sudden desperation, placing herself under her shoulder and helping to heft her up. But no matter what she did, the Paragon suit could not rise on its broken legs, and Ishtara merely hissed in pain at her efforts.
It is no use, Leandra. You must save yourself.
The broken matron said past hard breaths.
No, I can still take you from here. If the armor will not move, then maybe...
The younger Canoness began to argue, but Ishtara shook her head.
No, Leandra. My daughter, if I depart this armor, here in this field, it will kill me. My body is broken. The machine is half of what supports me now. If I cannot escape within this armor, then I cannot escape at all.
The Canoness Superior panted, fresh blood upon her lips.
I refuse to accept that. Me and my sisters, we can fight our way out.
The Canoness insisted to her.
Even if that were true, it will take all of you to lift me. You cannot divide that effort. Please, Leandra, you must take the mask. You must carry forward the faith.
Ishtara insisted, slumping back, her body nearly limp now, barely holding herself up. All around them, the Sister Celestians were fighting with all they had, but most of the rebels appeared to be beyond retreating. more willing to cover the Imperial sisters with their sheer numbers than to try to run away. They beat them back, clubbing the crowds of maddened civilians with power mauls, and unloading the rapid spitting hand bolters into them at near point-blank range.
This is a difficult situation for Leandra. Wow. And she can't, the Canoness Superior can't leave the suit. If she does, she dies. And I don't know if these ladies can pick up the suit along with the Canoness Superior inside there. If they try to do that, I think they're going to be under threat from the civilians of Axum as they pick them off one by one. Yeah, so yeah, it's difficult.
Punching bloody holes in various life forms. It was not an effort that could be sustained, Leandra knew. Feeling tears stinging her eyes, she firmed her lips and nodded rigidly.
Very well. If it is the only way, then I'll...
She began to say, trying to keep her voice from breaking, but was interrupted by a new sound. She blinked, confused by the stark difference of this sound to all the others around it. The effect evidently not contained to just the Canoness herself, as many paused to look in the direction of the noise. It was a long, shrill whistle, followed shortly after by a shouted command. "Soldiers of the Guard, charge!" roared a man who stood on an elevated piece of wreckage which had fallen from the ship.
So there's more reinforcements?
Unlike the majority of Imperial commanders, this man wore no badges, had no marks of greatness, nor even a proper uniform. He was dressed in plain, bleached sackcloth, and save for the belt at his waist, the gun in his right hand, and the whistle in his left, he appeared to have nothing.
Is this Major Lazarus? Plain cloths? It has to be made... Oh, sorry. Saint Lazarus. Yes. Oh, okay. Welcome back to the battlefield.
But they recognized him immediately.
Major Lazarus?
Saint Lazarus. Correct yourself there, Leandra.
Leandra said in disbelief, her surprise swelling all the more as his call was answered by a unified frontal assault of varied Imperial soldiers. Kriegers, Cadians, Calambians, Vestellans, and more, all charging side by side in an enraged rush, firing their weapons before colliding viciously with the flanks of the rebel mob.
I feel so sorry for the Axum civilians, I really do. But I'm also happy that St. Lazarus with his forces have arrived to save the Canoness Superior. Yeah, I'm happy for that. Oh man, this feels so wrong. This feels so very wrong. Hey.
Even the normally silent men of Krieg bellowed inside their gas masks, raising bayonets and other weapons of close-range carnage into the air, and driving them furiously down into the foe. The untrained mobs may have been confident in overwhelming only 6 sisters, but Lazarus had brought an army of thousands. The Axumites and the fouler things hiding among them were pushed back and soon forced into a panicked rout. The retreating, stomping feet of their running crowds claiming nearly as many of their own lives as the weapons and fervor of the Imperial soldiers. Even so, the mob was truly enormous, and contrary to their rapid killing, it was growing by the second. All Lazarus could really do was cut a corridor through them, holding it up and open with precise killing zones established by his men in the wake of the short-lived rout. Leandra watched as a squad of Cadian shock troopers fought their way through the encircling crowd. 4 of them made up the first group, led by one short, dark-skinned man with a tattoo of the Aquila stretching across the back of his head. He was using a scattergun to blow literal holes through the rebel line, scattering them in one way or another. Behind him, an equally short but thicker-built soldier wearing a long bandana inked with the signs of the Imperial faith wove in. a combat knife in each hand. He dispatched any of the dying but not quite dead that he came near, and fell into the living lines of fighting or running soldiers like a bladed disc being fired into a rack of hanging grox meat. Supporting this man was a helmed woman wielding a long lass in one hand and a las pistol in the other, showing odd fury and exceptional skill as she utilized both to fire over and around her companions, lancing rebels from the tops of turrets and from the seats of flying bikes. And most oddly of all was a man who stood beside her. Not Cadian at all, but a young Krieger, his broken mask down around his neck, revealing a head of sweaty, unkempt orange hair over a face marked with blood spatter, a haze of freckles, and a large bandage covering half his head and one of his eyes entirely. He had only one arm, but that arm held a hot-shot pistol, which he was using to burn precise holes through any civilian combatants who attempted to approach, or even flee through their flank. Despite being bare, the teenager's face was placid, almost bordering on uninterested, doing his duty without the slightest inflection of emotion upon his face. The squad fought their way to the two canonesses, quickly joined by the others who helped them push back any encroaching hostiles and put up a temporary defensive perimeter. The leading man approached, saluting the canonesses, first Leandra, and then the slumped bulk that was Ishtara. "Your Holinesses, we have come to secure you for retrieval," he said plainly.
Retrieval?
Leandra asked, eyes narrowing. Yes, ma'am. We were told very specifically to tell you that we were not retreating. We are retrieving you and your forces back to the staging area within the Basilica compound.
Lazarus, you know how these Sisters of Battle are, definitely. That's good. Retrieval. Retrieval. Good one.
Do you find that acceptable? He asked, sounding just a bit nervous at the end. Leandra scanned the scene and could not help but break into a smile, nodding her head.
Yes, I think it will be quite acceptable, Captain,
she said in response. "Stern, ma'am. Captain Javik Stern of the Cadian Elite, at your service," he reported, holding his salute.
At ease, Captain. I hope you brought more than just a couple of Cadians and one one-armed Krieger. My mother, the Canoness Superior, needs help moving. She cannot be extracted from her armor, not here in the field. We need to...
The younger Canoness began to say before trailing off as her concerns were answered, even without the Cadian speaking.
Ogren.
Behind him arrived 4 massive Ogren abhuman soldiers, a red-suited commissar standing between them. "All right, you lovable lunks, just like we practiced," the straight-backed, saber-wielding officer snapped, the Ogrens flapping their heads in response. "Knuckle, get behind the big special woman. Duty, you go to one of her arms. I don't care which. Giggler, get across from Knuckle. And Cabbagehead, you get across from Duty." The man directed, the childlike giants almost tripping over each other to do as they were instructed to. With a fair amount of consistent coaching, the commissar directed the 4 in how to lift the Canoness Superior up, scolding them constantly to be more gentle, but getting Ishtara off the ground and moving again in a relatively small amount of time. The line of soldiers who fought to hold open the corridor folded in, one after the other, as the Ogrens went past, retreating back up towards the Basilica, and gathering up any and all Imperial forces they could reach along the way. They were quickly noticed by the main Republic forces, but their swift pace and ferocity kept them from being hemmed in, the barking heavy bolter turrets which began to fire from the walls aiding greatly in stunting any pursuing action. Though not without great losses, the Imperial forces which had been stationed and held in reserve within the Basilica walls charged out in several multi-pronged sorties, liberating many, but far from all of their embattled kin. Even then, the main avenue was entirely lost. Those forces all rapidly pushed back towards their own defenses once the shock of their counterattack had worn off. The last to return was Lazarus and his team, which had gone the furthest and returned with the most vital survivors. They entered, taking fire from behind, clustered together as they shoved their way past the open gates. As those gates finally swung closed, and thus shut out the hostility of the enemy, at least for now, the troops all around Lazarus let out beleaguered cheers. Voices exhausted, half defeated, but grateful to have been successful in their rescue attempts. Lazarus wiped thick sweat from his brow with his good arm, his machine portions still aching terribly. Before anything else, the former major trekked to one of the nearby medical tents and collected for himself a handful of painkillers, quickly surrendered into his custody by a reverent sister of the Hospitaller.
When did Lazarus lose his arm and get a machine arm? I can't remember when that happened. I don't remember. I'd have to go back to my reaction playlist and just check all the episodes where Lazarus appeared in. Yeah, I can't remember when he lost his arm. But anyways, it's good to see him.
He wasted little time in swallowing a quarter of what he had been given on his way out.
Saint Lazarus,
said a frail voice from nearby, just a few steps after he had left the tent. The former major turned to see the large form of Canoness Ishtara Ordain's paragon suit, laying in an awkward seating position as several sisters of the Order Hospitaller worked on safely extricating their elderly leader from the coffin-like confines of her damaged armor. They worked in a professional frenzy, seeming to almost be operating on the now unpowered suit of ancient technology. He came towards her, standing before her and then kneeling. "I am no saint," he said, looking down into the ground, heart beating heavy in his chest.
I know you fear the weight of your duty, but you are, as I say, you are a saint, bearer of his will.
Ishtara insisted as plates were carefully pried off and away from her body. "If that is what you say, Your Holiness, all I know is that you gave me back my death. The least I could do is attempt to return the favor," he said, looking up with a meager grin. The ailing woman responded with nothing for a time, and just as he was about to speak again, she breathed out her last words to him before falling into silence.
Protect us, Saint Lazarus. The lives of us all are in your hands.
She whispered, closing her eyes, her life falling into the hands of the sisters around her. "The Canoness Superior needs to rest. Please return to the others, if it suits you, Saint Lazarus," said one of the attending Hospitaller. Her deference towards him struck him as intolerably uncanny, and he nodded his head numbly, turning on his heel and walking back toward where the rest of the soldiers were assembling. Kriegers were gathering as best they could, silently falling into ragged lines, the gaps between them telling volumes of their losses. He figured, even with the survivors he had managed to bring back, the Death Corps working on the world were almost certainly reduced to half their strength. Nearly the same could be said for the Cadian ranks, though they had a somewhat larger force, no doubt thanks to the difference between their chosen tactics. They gathered in ranks of their own, roughly diagonal lines in place of straight formations, though theirs were no less riddled with gaps. The veterans of Ulania stood nearby, their commanders rapidly cannibalizing depleted squads, splitting their soldiers up and sending them to top off groups of greater numbers. 3 men were hauled before the rest of the assembled units, The word cowards sprayed over the fronts of their normally immaculate armor.
They're going to die.
They were not executed. Instead, each was given a slim chainsword and stripped of the top halves of their armored uniforms. Each one of them used their weapon to swiftly and painfully disembowel themselves, seemingly voluntarily.
Oh gosh, okay. Well, you're still dead anyways. Cowards. Traitors.
The gruesome ritual forced Lazarus' eyes away, directing his attention towards the chanting, shuddering men and women of the Freylin faithful. They stood in a mob, their men and women dressed not entirely unlike he was, wearing modest armor and bearing simple weapons. They convulsed and danced, chanting discordantly, painting images of the Emperor and the Aquila onto the ground with ashes they smeared using their toes.
Interesting. That's interesting. That is interesting.
All while they danced and danced. Those who did not dance sat amidst them in no particular order, often hugging their knees and rocking back and forth, muttering to themselves. The Calambian patriots watched wearily from nearby, at least those who cared to. They sat on packs of their equipment, lined up roughly, but dragging their feet in their reorganization, clearly not eager to count their considerable fallen. And he saw more. Recan death dogs howling like wild men as they lit torches for their dead. Carcosan untouchables silently gathering those corpses they could for burning and prayer. And many more besides. And in all of them, he saw the signs he had seen before. Wavering faith, exhaustion, pain born on both wounds and loss. And so, as he had done so many times in the past, he filled himself with as much false strength as he could, and gave them purpose. He picked one of the few Lehman Russ tanks which had survived and been retrieved, striding up onto it, startling its crew as he took hold of their company standard for support and looked out across the staging area. The place was filled with the shattered remains of tens of regiments and forces of the Imperium.
Now you will all be united, binded together as one cohesive force. Let's go, Lazarus. Let's go.
"Stand, men and women of the Emperor!" he shouted. "We have survived their worst tricks. Again and again they try to crush us with their dishonorable tactics. And again we survive their desperate deviousness. Look up! Do you see those fires? That is not just the presence of the enemy. The whole Zektek fleet has come here. Countless more regiments, reinforcements, relief, even the angels of death are likely to descend for us if we can just hold the line."
You said a lot there, Saint Lazarus. You said a lot. I think you said too much. But you have to say it to give them hope. But man, you said a lot. A lot. Oh, you sound like a politician right there, giving us big promises. And I don't know if those promises are going to be delivered. But man, oh.
He yelled to them, arms spread. "We have made it this far. We can make it further yet, but it will require all of our strength, all of our faith. If the Emperor were not with us, we would have fallen long ago. We are his hammer. We are his shield. And we will succeed through this. Sort yourselves into squads of at least 5. Command staff, report to me. Everyone get moving." Lazarus ordered, and, to his relief, the men stood, saluted, and obeyed. He breathed out a sigh, and then spotted Captain Stern. He hopped down off of the tank and caught up with the man and his depleted squad.
I like this image, Kubik. Oh man, Kubik worked overtime in this episode, really. Kubik really worked overtime. It's going to be hard for me to choose which one is going to be my thumbnail. It's really going to be hard to choose. This one is going to be up there as the top 3. Oh man, this is cool. Seeing St. Lazarus there, and then all the Imperium of Man forces below, the tanks. Ah, this is nice.
Stern, wait up. Lazarus called, causing the man to halt and snap to attention. Sir, yes, sir. He said, his squad following suit. At ease. Listen, Stern, I don't see Shadrach's forces out here, and we're going to need everyone we have and more. You served under him before. Any idea where he is or where he would go? Lazarus asked. Commissar Shadrach has no love for Sororitas, and I doubt he is eager to start taking directions from you, especially now, sir. However, if I had to guess, I would say he is probably inside the Basilica, dragging his feet with the vacating of his position. Reported Stern, crossing his hands behind his back. Yeah, well, with all due respect to the good Commissar, I'm not eager to work with him either. But what we want needs to take a second place to what we need, and what we need are more men to reinforce our position here. Go find him and make it clear that cooperation is not optional. Take however many people you need to ensure it goes smoothly. Try to remind him that he is trapped in here with us as well. If the walls fall, we'll all burn for it. Lazarus directed. It will be done, sir.
You'll find that Shadrach has already left. Yeah, he's already left. But I'm hoping you're able to catch him before, and you disrupt the plans that Shadrach and Tarweiler has in store for this planet.
Stern said with a sudden salute before turning and heading for a group of other soldiers, beginning to call them over for selection to perform the task while his existing squad remained hot on his heels. Lazarus's eyes caught on the one-armed Krieger who went with them. Something about the young man striking him as familiar. Was that the soldier who saved me in the mall? He muttered to himself.
Saint Lazarus,
said a voice he did not recognize, turning to see Canoness Leandra approaching him. Your Holiness, he said, bowing and averting his eyes.
you need not abase yourself so before me. By my mother's own words, you are a saint. It may even be that I may need to abase myself before you.
She said, making the former major wince. Please don't. This is all new enough as it is. Just, call me Major Lazarus for now. We can work the titles out after all this is done, he said, lifting his view to look at her as she nodded her head.
It will never be done. It will never be done.
Agreed. So, what is your plan?
She asked. He sighed heavily. I'm all out of plans, Canoness. My current idea goes something like this. Gather as many troops as we have available, position them along the walls and at fallback positions, and bleed the Republic for every single step they take towards this basilica. It may seem simple, but it's the best I have. I'm all ears, however, if you have any suggestions, he said. She shook her head, long locks bouncing with the movement.
I have nothing to add. In fact, I like it.
She stated, staring away to the right towards the massive, ornate gates. You like it? He asked, blinking. The sister nodded and smiled a humorless smile.
After all this trickery, deceit, and death, we will settle this final contest with our sheer grit and faith at last. No schemes, no gimmicks. Just those of us who remain, shoulder to shoulder against the darkness which assails us. It is in these bleakest moments that mankind shines brightest.
Also, it's where they create the best stories. In our darkest hour, defending the last bastion of mankind against old Xeno and heretic threats. Yeah.
Declared. A moment later, the gates thumped and trembled, and an alarm went off. One of the men stationed at the top of one of the gatehouses grasped a howler mic and began to speak. "To arms! Muster to arms! The enemies of the Emperor are approaching the gates! Prepare for an imminent attack!" The watchman called out in a panicked voice. "Let's hope you are correct, sister, because things are looking pretty bleak right now," Lazarus said, beginning to stride forward, the Canoness grinning at his back and lifting her helmet to place back over her head. "Everyone, get somewhere you need to be! Commanders, gather at my location! Sharpshooters, ratlings, and grenadiers, up on the wall! Ogrins, heavy infantry, and shock troops, get ready to patch breaches with firepower! Get me a Vox with the Tempestus Scions on the other side! And will somebody get me a proper gun and some Emperor-damned armor?" Lazarus was yelling, scowling as one of the passing men pushed a lasgun into his hands.
Man, he's really getting into his position here.
"Did I say I wanted a fracking moonbeam? If I'm going to die again, I'm dying holding something that fires bullets!"
Moonbeam?
"And you lot there! Emperor's teeth! What are you milling around for? Form up behind me, you flack-eating apes! What? Do you want to live forever? Get up and follow me! It's time to show our worth!"
Survivors, they're coming home.
It's a bit
They
loud.
float in darkness, they're not alone.
Loud.
Now here they come, now here they come, now they will be received.
No one could outrun the crash. It was all reduced to rubble, and then again to ash. To the blinding burning light, it's no use to fight. There's no one out there. There was no signal from where you were, or failed contact, no life to stir. Hovering above, gravity's roar.
video or is it me? Oh, okay. Alright guys, that is it with Star Wars vs. Warhammer 40K episode 36, Libra Nos, made on the YouTube channel AFanWithTooMuchTime. Oh, wow, the battles on the surface, the battles in space, it's just been non-stop action, non-stop death and destruction. You know, at wherever you turn, wherever you look, it's just been chaos. On the planet, I think this has got to be some of the worst fighting so far. You know, the way so many people have died in less than, an hour. Maybe, yeah, in less than an hour, so many people dead on both sides, either Star Wars or the Imperium. And then, of course, you have that the ship crash landing near the Basilica, so it's just been death everywhere. The Canoness Superior with her armor, or should I say her suit, the Paragon war suit, really, she was amazing. She was amazing, the way she cut through so many opponents, and even the Jedi that were facing up against her. You know, they really tried their best, but, you know, they were a bit cocky, they were a bit confident in their abilities, as they should be, you know, because they're Force wielders, they're Jedis. Sorry, my sister's saying bye. Yes, and really it was an amazing, you know, confrontation between these two forces. Whether you're part of the Star Wars side or you're part of the Warhammer side, it was amazing. Yes, bloody, gory, you know, people died in very horrific ways, but it was amazing fighting between these two factions. And surprisingly to me, you know, how the Star Wars side have actually pushed back the Imperium of Man all the way back to their center of operations. This is it. This is it. They can't go any further. They can't move any further. The Imperium of Man. They're stuck in the Basilica now. What's ever left of the forces. And I think also the clone troops have also being pushed to the limit in terms of how many men and Jedi are still available to fight. Maybe, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see in the next episode. But yes, essentially, both sides have reached a breaking point, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens in the next episode with that battle. The space front warfront, or battlefront, I should say, is also a bit complicated. One of the ships that tried to hyperspace ram Admiral Roller's vessel got teleported into the warp, or should I say it entered into the warp through some sort of singularity tear in space. Not entirely sure what exactly or how to describe what they entered into exactly, but they've exited into the warp, and without a Gallifeld, I think they are being consumed by demons or by some other entities that are in the warp. I don't know I don't think the Chaos Gods exist in the Warhammer 40K galaxy, but there are entities in the warp in the Star Wars galaxy. So they're there. I'm not sure if they're benevolent or malevolent. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's safe to say that they might be all dead. All the crew members aboard that vessel are dead. And even if they are alive, how are they going to get back to real space? That's a problem for them. So yeah, I think they're dead. Yes, Admiral Snipes or Spikes with his Spikes wall maneuver, using the wreckage of the Pride of the Core as a shield to protect his fleet of vessels from the Imperium of Man. That was a good idea from him. However, the Imperium of Man have also learned from previous battles against the Galactic Republic, and they've adapted to that situation or to that obstacle. And also, Spikes having another idea of shooting the Imperium of Man cruisers from below and above and behind instead of on the sides or on the bow of the ship. So yeah, that idea was good until they also adapted to that situation, and they have become a very difficult opponent to try and corner and to defeat for Admiral Spikes and his forces. The Oracle is still proceeding with their plan. The Oracle team, they're still proceeding with their plans. I'm not sure if they're going to ever change it or adapt to this new information that's going to be transferred to them in relation to the Pride of the Core and what happened on board that vessel. We'll just have to wait and see what happens with the Oracle team and if they're able to improvise. And yeah, really, Lazarus coming in to save the Canoness Superior and the rest of the Battle Sisters. It was amazing to see that, with all the other divisions of the Astra Militarum coming in there, with all of their techniques, advantages and strengths in terms of fighting the enemy, all united, fighting, working together, retrieving who could be retrieved, saving who could be saved, and getting back to the Basilica. That was amazing to see. The unity, the strength that Lazarus is able to muster within the men and women who fight for the Imperium of Man is truly something amazing to see. And yes, he might have sprinkled some lies or some hope lies here and there, but I guess it's necessary because, the morale of the people within the Basilica was very, very low, and they needed something to hope for, something to fight for. And Lazarus has given them that chance, has given them that hope. And let's hope that it does pull through, that, reinforcements from Battlefleet ZekTech do come in. However, I'm not sure if they will. I don't know. Rolla hasn't spoken about anything about, getting reinforcements to the planet so far. All that she's talked about is battling against the fleet that is orbiting the planet. So I'm not entirely sure. I don't know. I honestly just don't know. We'll just have to wait and see if Astartes are coming, or if other regiments of the Astra Militarum are coming here, as well as the Mechanicum of Mars. Yeah, we just have to be patient and hope for the best for the Warhammer 40k side. And the civilians of Axum with Genestealer cult members, or should I say the Genestealer Tyranid. Oh, this is just worrisome right here. This is very worrisome. I want to support the civilians of Axum, but if they've been infiltrated by the Genestealer cult or a Genestealer Tyranid, I'm worried. I'm really, really worried, because they need to be exterminated. I'm still waiting for Javona to die. So there's a lot of problems springing up with the civilians, and yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. I want them to make it. I want them to reclaim their homeworld. But if they're going to reclaim the homeworld only for it to be handed over to the Genestealer cult, no, it will just be a very, very disappointing, bitter victory, I would say. So yeah, they have to be dealt with. Not the civilians in totality, I mean those who are part of the Genestealer cult. They need to be dealt with as soon as possible. And yeah, guys, that is it. That is it with episode 36, Libra Nos. Remember, if you want to check out the original video as well as AFanWithTooMuchTime's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. If you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos. And I'll see you guys next time. Hopefully next week. Okay, bye-bye.